Hey guys, it's Looch. So the documentary I had on my queue is Eugene Jarecki's documentary, The King. My first thought is anybody who's going to make a documentary about Elvis, possibly the most documented figure in American pop culture, they must have a really different angle to it. Well, what transpires in the very beginning of the documentary is Elvis owned a 1963 Rolls Royce. And so all the interviews take place in this Rolls Royce, and they go in chronological order to Tupelo, the birthplace, to Memphis, to Nashville, to Vegas, to LA, and New York. I'm just going to be honest. In the first 5 minutes, they always have talking heads in the documentaries spewing their knowledge about the subject. Well, Ashton Kutcher, he's the first person that kind of pops out. And then Ethan Hawke, who is admittedly a producer on this movie, but do you care what Ethan Hawke has to say about Elvis? I don't, but there are other people, Emmylou Harris, John Hyatt, and some of the musicians that he worked with that are interviewed. But the crazy thing about this documentary is I think its intention was to represent Elvis Presley's story as the American dream, or how it can exemplify an American story, and then how we get to Trump. Ambitious and scattered. That's what I'm going to say about that. So what happens is they talk a lot, obviously, about the cultural appropriation at the time, because Sam Phillips of Sun Studios was a fan of gospel and R&B, black music. So was Elvis. But it took a white singer to bring this music to the masses. And as Chuck D very famously in 1989 song Fight the Power said,
Elvis was a hero the most, but he never meant to me. Straight up racist, that sucker was simple and plain. Mother him and John Wayne.
Chuck D's in this documentary, and he says that, and he says, yes, there was the cultural appropriation, but then later in the film, he comes back, and it's almost, I don't know if the filmmaker wanted to just sort of edit it in a certain way that I find it hard to believe that Chuck D now, 20 years later, thinks, oh, maybe I was wrong. It's confusing. I mean, they talk to a lot of people. Van Jones is another person who's interviewed about this as well. And, I guess that's up to you to decide if it was just a nod to the music that he loved and grew up with, or was it ripping black people off? And that's a huge thing. The other thing is that there's a moment in this Rolls Royce which keeps breaking down. Metaphor alert. John Hyatt gets in the back of this Rolls Royce and starts crying. And you don't really know at first why. And then after a moment or two, he says, I have a sense now of how trapped and isolated Elvis must have felt. And Emmylou Harris echoes that sentiment as well. I guess I won't go on and tell you all of like I said, maybe I just got thrown for a loop when I saw Mike Myers and Alec Baldwin as the talking heads. But if you're an Elvis fan, there is footage that I've never seen before, and you may be interested in that. So the film, it's called The King, and it is streaming everywhere you stream janky documentaries.